The letter that changed my life arrived on a Tuesday, wedged between a flyer for a local pizzeria and a credit card offer. It was from a law firm I'd never heard of, informing me of the passing of my great-uncle Alistair, a man I knew only through fragments of my mother's stories. He was the family recluse, the black sheep who cut ties decades ago and never looked back. According to the letter, he had left me his entire estate. The words didn't feel real. I was a 28-year-old, graphic designer living paycheck to paycheck in a cramped apartment. My most valuable possession was a slightly outdated laptop. An estate sounded like something out of a period drama, not my life. My curiosity, tinged with skepticism, brought me to the lawyer's office a few days later. There, a kind-faced man named Mr. Henderson handed me a thick folder. Inside was the deed to a property I'd never heard of. 50 acres of undeveloped land on the outskirts of Northwood, a town that had recently transformed into an affluent suburb. A quick search on my phone confirmed what Mr. Henderson soon told me. Land in Northwood was astronomically expensive. Based on recent sales, he said, adjusting his glasses, your inheritance is conservatively valued at $10 million. I nearly fell out of my chair. The only condition in the will was clear. I could never sell the land to a developer planning to build a high-density housing complex. My great-uncle, it seemed, had a strong aversion to cookie-cutter neighborhoods. When I saw the land for the first time, I understood why. It was breathtaking. A stretch of rolling hills, ancient oak trees, and a sparkling creek winding through the property like a silver ribbon. Wild and untouched, it stood in stark contrast to the manicured lawns and identical mansions of Northwood. Estates, a gated community that bordered my property. As I walked the perimeter, a sense of peace settled over me. This wasn't just a financial windfall, it was a sanctuary. I decided to honor Alistair's wishes. I'd keep the land, maybe build a small eco-friendly cabin, and preserve the rest. The mio. Trouble began a week later with a letter left on the rusted gate at the edge of my property. It came in a cream-colored envelope bearing the crest of the Northwood Estates Homeowners Association. The letter was polite but firm, welcoming me to the area while gently reminding me of the community's aesthetic standards. It detailed rules about things like lawn maintenance, approved fence designs, and bans on unsightly structures. I found it odd, given that my land wasn't part of their HOA, but I dismissed it as an overzealous welcome packet. Since I had no intention of joining their HOA, their rules didn't apply to me. The following weekend, I hired a surveyor to officially mark my property lines. As he worked, a woman in a pristine white tennis outfit approached us from one of the sprawling McMansions. Her blonde hair was pulled into a tight ponytail, and she radiated a kind of entitled determination. Without introducing herself, she pointed to the surveyor's stakes and demanded, "What's the meaning of this?" Her voice was sharp, dripping with condescension. I explained that this was my property, and I was simply having it surveyed. Her eyes narrowed. "This land has been vacant for years," she snapped. "It's an eyesore and a fire hazard. The HOA has been maintaining the 10 feet bordering our community, and we expect you to uphold our standards." I calmly informed her that the HOA had no jurisdiction over my private property and assured her I would handle its upkeep. She scoffed, turned sharply on her heel, and stormed back to her house, muttering something about uncooperative new neighbors. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next Saturday, as I was clearing brush near the creek, a police car pulled up. 2 officers got out, their expressions serious. Someone had reported a squatter on the property. Humiliated, but composed, I showed them my ID and the deed. They were professional and left without further issues, but as they drove away, I saw her, Karen, watching smugly from her perfectly landscaped yard. That was when I realized this wasn't just an overzealous HOA president. This was a power play. Karen wanted my land, and she wasn't going to play fair. I had inherited a $10 million property, but I'd also inherited a problem. The battle for my great-uncle's legacy had begun, and I had no doubt Karen's complaint was just the opening move. The first call to the police was unsettling, but I tried to brush it off. Karen was a bully, used to getting her way. She'd made a power play and it had failed. Now that the local police knew I was the legitimate owner, I assumed she'd back off. That naive hope lasted exactly 1 week. I had decided to spend the weekend camping on the property, hoping to get a feel for the land and plan where my future cabin might go. As dusk settled, I started a small legal campfire to cook dinner. Then, the flash of red and blue lights cut through the twilight. The officers told me they'd received a call about an illegal burn and potential arson. Once again, I had to prove my identity and ownership. I pointed out that my fire was contained in a cleared pit, far from any trees, and met all local regulations. One of the officers, a tired-looking younger man, sighed. "Look, sir," he said, "we have to respond to every call." The caller was very persistent. I knew exactly who the persistent caller was and could almost feel Karen's smug satisfaction from across the property line. The officers left, but the evening was ruined. I sat by the fire, my food tasting like ash. It was becoming clear. Karen wasn't just trying to intimidate me. She was trying to drive me off my own land, using the police as her enforcers. The calls didn't stop. If I used my chainsaw to clear a fallen branch, it was a noise complaint. If I parked my truck near the gate, it was reported as an abandoned vehicle. Every time I had to stop what I was doing to explain myself to the police. It was a constant barrage of petty harassment. The officers, initially polite, began to show their frustration too. They knew the calls were baseless, but protocol required them to investigate. I was becoming a regular headache for them, though none of it was my doing. Feeling cornered, I decided to fight back with documentation and technology. I installed a high-end security system covering every inch of my property, especially the shared border with Northwood Estates. I started logging every incident in a detailed journal, police visits, letters, even glimpses of Karen spying from her blinds. It felt like I was building a case, although I wasn't sure who I'd take it to. Then I dug into Karen and the HOA she represented. Online research revealed that her husband was a partner at a major commercial real estate firm. Suddenly, it all made sense. This wasn't just about community standards or me being an eyesore, it was about money. My 50 acres were an undeveloped patch in their otherwise pristine, profitable neighborhood. If they could pressure me into leaving, her husband's firm would have a prime opportunity to buy the land, likely for a bargain from someone worn down by endless harassment and legal fights. Although the will's clause against high-density housing might complicate things, a skilled real estate lawyer could probably find a way around it. They didn't just want me gone, they wanted my inheritance. This realization filled me with a new sense of purpose. My great-uncle had left this land to me as his legacy, a place of peace and nature. I wasn't about to let their greed destroy it. My next move was to build a proper fence. Not the flimsy wire fencing already in place, but a solid 8-foot privacy barrier along the entire border with Northwood Estates. It was an expensive project, but it would send a clear message. This is my property, stay out. The day the materials were delivered, Karen was there, phone in hand, recording everything. She shouted that the fence violated HOA covenants. I shouted back that her covenants didn't apply to my land, or to me. As construction began, the harassment escalated. Every day the police were called. Workers were accused of trespassing, making too much noise, and blocking the road with their trucks. Each time I had to present my permits and proof of ownership. It was exhausting, but with every post that went into the ground, I felt a small victory. The wall was going up, a barrier against her relentless interference. But just as the final panels were being installed, I received a certified letter from the HOA's law firm. It was a cease and desist order claiming my fence devalued their properties and threatening legal action. Karen had moved beyond petty police reports. Now she was bringing in lawyers. The stakes had risen and the fight was far from over. The cease and desist letter was intimidating, packed with legal jargon and thinly veiled threats. It claimed my privacy fence created a hostile and unsightly border, allegedly violating a local ordinance about neighborhood character, a rule I was certain they'd made up. The letter demanded I tear down the fence immediately or face a lawsuit for damaging their property values. My heart raced as I read it. I was a graphic designer, not a legal expert, and the thought of a court battle against a wealthy HOA with high-powered lawyers was terrifying. For a moment, I considered giving in. Maybe the fence was too much. Maybe I should just let it go. But then I remembered the constant police visits, Karen's smug expression, and the realization that her husband stood to gain from my misery. This wasn't about a fence. It was about pushing me into submission. Taking a deep breath, I called Mr. Henderson, my great-uncle's lawyer. I explained everything, my voice shaking with anger and fear. He listened carefully and then said calmly, "Don't worry, they're trying to intimidate you. It's a common tactic. They have no legal standing. Your property isn't part of their association, and you're fully within your rights to build that fence. I'll handle it." Mr. Henderson drafted a response that was a masterclass in legal rebuttal. It politely but firmly dismissed their claims, pointed out their pattern of harassment, and warned that any further baseless threats would result in a countersuit for harassment and emotional distress. We sent it via certified mail. For 2 weeks, there was silence. During that time, the fence was completed, a sturdy wall of dark wood blocking any view of my property from Northwood Estates. The police calls stopped. For the first time, I allowed myself to hope they'd finally back down, but the quiet didn't last. Karen, furious at being outmaneuvered, found a new way to attack: the environment. One morning, a team from the county's Environmental Protection Department arrived, claiming they'd received an anonymous tip, no prizes for guessing who it came from, that I was dumping hazardous materials into the creek and damaging protected wetlands. The accusation was far more serious. Led by a stern woman named Ms. Albright, the team spread out across my property, taking soil and water samples. I was stunned. The most hazardous thing I'd ever brought onto the land was bug spray, as they worked. I tried to explain that I was an environmentalist at heart, planning to build a small, eco-friendly cabin complete with solar panels and a rainwater collection system. I even showed Ms. Albright my sketches. She listened but remained skeptical. "We have to investigate every credible report," she said flatly, implying Karen's tip had been taken seriously. Before leaving, she informed me that all work on the land, including clearing brush or mowing, was prohibited until the investigation was complete. The results could take weeks. My property was effectively frozen. Waiting was unbearable. I felt trapped, a victim of a bureaucratic system weaponized by a vindictive neighbor. The peace I had once felt on the land was replaced by constant anxiety and frustration. Determined to fight back, I spent hours at the county records office, digging through documents about Northwood Estates and the surrounding area. That's when I found it, a geological survey map from 20 years ago, created before the development was built. The map detailed the area's topography and geology, including my great-uncle's land. One corner of the map contained a note from the geologist: significant quartz and tourmaline deposits, further exploration recommended, potential for high-value mineral extraction. My mind raced as I read it. I wasn't a geologist, but I knew that certain types of tourmaline could be incredibly valuable. Was it possible my great-uncle had known about this? Had he held on to the land not just for sentimental reasons, but because it was worth far more than anyone realized? Suddenly, everything clicked. The harassment, the desperation to get my property. This wasn't just about expanding a subdivision for profit. If the land held valuable minerals, it could be worth millions. Karen's real. Estate developer husband wouldn't be interested in just building houses. His firm likely had ties to companies that could extract those resources. My $10 million inheritance might be worth exponentially more. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just neighborhood drama. They were orchestrating a calculated scheme to steal a potential gold mine, and I was standing in their way. The environmental investigation wasn't just harassment. It was a strategic move to block me from accessing my land while they sought a way to take it for themselves. The geological map changed everything. This wasn't just a nosy neighbor causing trouble. It was a calculated conspiracy rooted in greed. I quickly realized I couldn't handle this alone. My first call was to a semi-retired geologist, Dr. Miles, who came highly recommended. I sent him a high-resolution scan of the old map and asked for his expert opinion. His reply came faster than expected. He was intrigued by the notes on the map and confirmed that certain varieties of tourmaline and associated minerals found in quartz veins could be highly valuable. He agreed to perform a preliminary, non-invasive survey of the property as soon as the county's hold was lifted. My second call was to Mr. Henderson. I explained my discovery, my voice buzzing with a mix of excitement and fear. "They're not after the land, Mr. Henderson," I said. "They're after what's in it. This is bigger than a property line dispute." He was silent for a moment before his tone shifted to something sharper, more strategic. "This changes everything," he said. "Their harassment isn't just malicious, it's financially motivated on a massive scale. That gives us leverage." He advised me to keep the discovery under wraps. If Karen and her husband knew that I was aware of the land's true value, they might become even more desperate and dangerous. Weeks dragged on until I finally received a letter from the environmental department. As expected, the test came back negative. There was no contamination, no hazardous waste. The report stated there was no evidence of any environmental wrongdoing. The hold on my property was lifted. While it felt like a victory, it was bittersweet. They had wasted a month of my life and caused an immense amount of stress, all based on lies. But Mr. Henderson saw an opportunity. He immediately filed a formal complaint with the county, detailing the baseless reports and requesting an investigation into the misuse of municipal resources. He included the environmental report and a log of the dozens of frivolous police calls. We were starting to build a solid case against them. The day after the hold was lifted, Dr. Miles arrived. He was an older man with a kind smile and eyes lit with scientific curiosity. Armed with ground-penetrating radar and other equipment that looked straight out of a sci-fi movie, he spent 2 days surveying the property, focusing on the area near the creek marked on the old map. I felt an unfamiliar mix of nerves and excitement, the kind I hadn't experienced since inheriting the land. On the second afternoon, Dr. Miles finished his work and turned to me with a wide grin. "Well," he said, "your great-uncle was sitting on a treasure trove." He explained that his equipment detected extensive quartz veins across the property, with strong indications of gem-quality L-bait tourmaline, including the rare and highly prized Paraíba type, famous for its vibrant neon blue-green hue. There were also signs of other valuable minerals like spodumene and beryl. While precise valuations would require core sampling, he estimated the mineral rights could be worth $30 to $50 million, potentially even more. I was stunned. The number was so large it felt unreal. $10 million for the land had already been life-changing. This was something else entirely, wealth that could transform generations. Dr. Miles handed me his preliminary report. "Guard this with your life," he warned, "and find a good lawyer. When this kind of money is involved, people lose their minds." His advice was chillingly accurate. My inheritance wasn't just land, it was a gold mine. Karen's relentless harassment, her husband's suspicious involvement, the campaign to drive me away. It all made sense now. They must have known. Perhaps they had conducted their own survey years ago, waiting for Alistair to pass away so they could claim the land from an unsuspecting heir. That unsuspecting heir was supposed to be me. The realization was empowering, but terrifying. This was no longer about a fence dispute or my right to privacy. I was now the guardian of a fortune, and powerful people were intent on stealing it. My next steps had to be carefully planned. I needed to secure not just the land itself, but the mineral rights beneath it. My quiet life as a graphic designer was over. I was now in the mining business, whether I wanted to be or not. My only ally in this fight was the ghost of a great uncle I'd never met. The battle with Karen was about to escalate from petty squabbles to a high-stakes war, and I was standing at the center of it all. With Dr. Miles's report in hand, I felt like I was holding a lit stick of dynamite. The knowledge of the land's true value was a weapon, but one that could easily backfire. My strategy shifted from defense to cautious offense. I needed to solidify my position and expose Karen's motives before she could find another way to attack. Mr. Henderson agreed. "We need to control the narrative," he said during our next meeting. "Right now, you're the weird recluse ruining their neighborhood. We need to reframe you as the victim of a coordinated, fraudulent scheme." Our first move was to fortify my legal standing regarding the mineral rights. We filed paperwork with the county to officially register Dr. Miles's findings. This created a public record of the land's potential value tied directly to my name. It was like planting a flag. Now, any attempt by Karen's husband's company to claim the land or its resources would be much more complicated. They could no longer pretend it was worthless scrubland. Next, we went on the offensive against the HOA. Armed with the environmental report clearing my name and the log of police calls, Mr. Henderson filed a formal civil harassment restraining order against Karen. The petition detailed her campaign of baseless accusations, from the squatter and arson claims to the fraudulent environmental report. We weren't asking for money. We were asking the court to order her to cease all contact and stop filing complaints without credible evidence. This would force her to defend her actions under oath. The day of the court hearing was surreal. I sat in a small courtroom, wearing a suit I had to buy for the occasion. Karen was there with 2 lawyers, looking indignant and portraying herself as a concerned citizen protecting her community. She told the judge I was hostile and unstable, that my fence was an aggressive eyesore, and that she had a civic duty to report suspicious activity. When it was our turn, Mr. Henderson didn't just refute her claims, he systematically dismantled them. He presented the police logs, showing a clear pattern of harassment. He presented the all clear from the environmental department. Then came the masterstroke. He called a retired police sergeant to the stand, a man who had supervised several of the calls to my property. The sergeant testified that the calls from Karen's number became so frequent and baseless that they were considered a nuisance and a drain on police resources. He stated that on at least 2 occasions, she had been formally warned about misusing the 911 system. The final piece of evidence was a sworn affidavit from one of the fencing contractors. He testified that Karen had repeatedly come to the property line to scream at his workers, filming them and threatening to ruin his business by posting negative reviews online if they didn't stop construction. The judge's expression grew sterner with each piece of evidence. He looked at Karen, who was now pale, her confident demeanor crumbling. He granted the restraining order. She was legally barred from contacting me, coming within 50 feet of my property line and filing any official complaints without first submitting evidence to her local police precinct for verification. She stormed out of the courtroom, her face a mask of pure fury. I had won the battle, but her expression told me the war was far from over. The victory in court gave me some breathing room. The direct harassment stopped. The silence from the other side of my fence was blissful. I used the time to further secure my land. I upgraded the security system, adding more cameras and motion-activated floodlights. I also posted no trespassing signs at regular intervals, citing the relevant state law. I was turning my property into a fortress. During this lull, I delved deeper into my great-uncle Alistair's life. I found an old trunk in the attic of the lawyer's office filled with his journals. Reading them was like meeting the man for the first time. He was a naturalist, a geologist by hobby, and a fierce individualist. He had discovered the mineral deposits himself decades ago. He wrote that he never excavated them because he didn't want to destroy the land's natural beauty. He called it his sleeping treasure. He had been approached by developers and mining companies over the years, but had always refused. He knew what the land was worth, both financially and spiritually. The journals also revealed that he had had run-ins with the Northwood Estates HOA from the moment it was formed. They saw his land as an imperfection, a blemish on their pristine world. He saw their development as a cancer, slowly eating away at the natural landscape. I was not just fighting my own battle, I was continuing his. The peace was broken by a new, more insidious threat. I started noticing drones flying over my property, small, commercial drones hovering high above the trees, often lingering over the area Dr. Miles had identified as the most promising. They were too high to identify the operator, but I had a very good idea who was behind it. Karen might have been legally muzzled, but her husband's company had other ways of gathering intelligence. They were conducting aerial surveillance, likely trying to get their own data to confirm the mineral deposits without setting foot on my land. The restraining order couldn't stop them from using the airspace above. It was a loophole, and they were exploiting it with impunity. The silent, buzzing drones were a constant, unnerving reminder that I was being watched, my every move scrutinized by people who saw my inheritance as their jackpot. The drones played a psychological game. Every time I stepped outside, I felt a prickle on my neck, the sensation of being watched. Their constant, high-pitched hum was a reminder that even with a restraining order and a fortress-like fence, I wasn't safe. They probed for weaknesses, assessing my property from above, leaving me feeling exposed and vulnerable. I documented every sighting, noting times and flight paths, but legally, my hands were tied. Airspace above a certain altitude was public domain. Mr. Henderson and I knew we had to force their hand. We sat on a mountain of potential wealth, useless as long as it remained potential. To secure the inheritance, we needed to legitimize it, moving from survey maps and geological predictions to tangible proof. This meant core sampling, a significant step. It required heavy drilling equipment, causing temporary, localized disruption to the land, something my great-uncle's journal suggested he was always hesitant to do. But I felt I had no choice. It was the only way to get a definitive valuation and, more importantly, attract serious partners who could help me fend off Karen and her husband's corporate machine. Finding a discreet, reputable drilling company was a challenge. We needed a team that wouldn't leak information. After careful vetting, we hired a firm with a strong reputation for sensitive projects. The day the drilling rig arrived on a lowboy trailer was tense. We used a back entrance, far from the Northwood Estates fence line, hoping to avoid immediate detection. The team worked quickly and professionally, setting up the small footprint drill over the primary target identified by Dr. Miles. For 3 days, the drill's low hum was the only sound. They extracted several long rock cores from deep within the earth, each carefully packed and labeled. Dr. Miles was on site, his eyes gleaming with excitement as he examined the raw samples. Even to my untrained eye, the cores were beautiful, laced with thick quartz veins and flashes of incredible color, deep pinks, vibrant greens, and, most thrillingly, streaks of the electric blue that signaled the presence of Paraíba-type tourmaline. The samples went to a certified gemological lab for official analysis and appraisal. The 2-week wait was the most nerve-wracking period of my life. During this time, drone activity intensified, flying lower, more aggressively, as if they knew we had done something significant. One even hovered directly over the drill site long after the equipment was gone. Then the call came. It was Mr. Henderson. His voice was unsteady. "Are you sitting down?" he asked. The lab report was in. The results were staggering. The deposits were even richer than Dr. Miles's most optimistic projections. The concentration of gem-quality tourmaline, including a significant load of the ultra-rare Paraíba, was extraordinary. The preliminary valuation estimated the easily extractable minerals at over $200 million. I felt the air leave my lungs. The number was incomprehensible, the kind of wealth that appeared in headlines, not in the life of a graphic designer from the city. This land wasn't a gold mine, it was a dragon's hoard. This new valuation explained everything: the relentless pressure, the corporate espionage, the willingness to abuse legal and municipal systems. For a chance at this kind of money, people would do anything. With the official lab report, everything accelerated. Mr. Henderson discreetly reached out to major players in the ethical mining industry. Companies known for environmentally responsible practices and for working with landowners, not against them. We weren't looking to sell, we were looking for a partnership. We needed capital, expertise, and most importantly, a corporate ally with the resources to fight a prolonged legal and financial war against Karen's husband's firm. Our meetings were held in secure locations far from prying eyes and listening drones. News of a major, untapped tourmaline deposit in North America spread like wildfire through the closed circles of the high-end gem industry. We suddenly had the attention of powerful people. We were no longer a lone landowner against a predatory developer. We were a potential key player in the global gemstone market. The shift in power was palpable. One company we spoke to, a multinational mining corporation with a strong ethical track record, was extremely interested. They saw the potential not just for profit, but for a major PR victory, opening a conflict-free American source for one of the world's most coveted gems. Their legal team, a veritable army of corporate lawyers, began its own due diligence. And that's when they found the missing connection. Karen's husband's real estate firm was a subsidiary of a much larger, more ruthless conglomerate known for hostile takeovers and asset stripping. This conglomerate also had a shell corporation specializing in mineral rights acquisition. They had been trying to acquire Alistair's land for over a decade. The chain of command was clear. The parent conglomerate wanted the minerals and used the real estate firm and the HOA as local muscle to harass me into selling cheap. The drones weren't just for surveillance, they were corporate espionage tools. This wasn't a local feud anymore. I had stumbled into a fight with a shadowy multi-billion-dollar corporation, and Karen was just their pawn on the front line. Unmasking the parent conglomerate felt like finding the final boss in a video game, a terrifying, faceless entity with near-limitless resources. Karen and her husband were mere middle management bullies, carrying out orders. This solidified my decision. I needed a partner, a corporate titan to level the playing field. After intense negotiations, we struck a deal with an ethical mining corporation, which I'll call Geo Alliance. It wasn't a sale, but a strategic partnership. They would provide capital and operational expertise for a small, environmentally sensitive mine, receiving a percentage of the yield. Crucially, I retained majority ownership and final say, honoring my great-uncle's conservationist spirit. The most vital part of the deal was that Geo Alliance's formidable legal department became my own. The moment the ink dried, the conflict dynamic shifted. Our first move was a clear message. Geo Alliance's lawyers, on my behalf, filed a massive civil lawsuit against Karen, her husband, his real estate firm, the Northwood Estates HOA, and the parent conglomerate. The lawsuit cited civil conspiracy, tortious interference, abuse of process, and a RICO charge, claiming a pattern of racketeering designed to illegally acquire my property. We sought damages for my legal fees, emotional distress, and punitive damages. The multi-million-dollar lawsuit was a bombshell, immediately picked up by financial news. The story was compelling. A predatory corporation using a suburban HOA to harass an individual and steal his inheritance. The anonymous conglomerate was thrust into a negative spotlight, its stock taking a noticeable hit. The response was immediate. The drones vanished, the surveillance stopped. I received a panicked letter, not from the HOA, but the conglomerate's general counsel, proposing a settlement. They wanted to stop the bleeding quietly. We refused. Mr. Henderson and the Geo Alliance, legal team knew we had them. The discovery process would allow us to subpoena internal communications, emails, memos, phone records, which we believed held the smoking gun. Explicit proof they knew about the minerals and orchestrated the harassment. The legal battle was slow and grinding. Their lawyers used every delay tactic, but with Geo Alliance's backing, we matched them. We deposed Karen. It was the first time I'd seen her since the restraining order hearing. In the sterile conference room, her mask of suburban superiority was gone. She was nervous, evasive, claiming to be a concerned homeowner. But under relentless questioning from a senior litigator, her story crumbled. She couldn't explain her obsessive focus on my property. Confronted with phone records showing dozens of calls between her husband, and a known executive at the conglomerate on the days of police and environmental complaints, she broke. Her husband's deposition was even more revealing. Arrogant and dismissive, he was clearly used to being the smartest person in the room. He tried to shield his actions behind corporate structure and plausible deniability. But when our team produced an internal memo, leaked by a disgruntled employee from his firm who had seen the news story, his arrogance evaporated. The memo, dated the week after my great-uncle's death, was from him to a superior at the parent conglomerate. The old man is gone. The heir is a 28-year-old artist with no resources. We should be able to acquire the Northwood parcel at a significant discount within 6 months, commencing local pressure campaign. It was the smoking gun, explicit, written proof of their conspiracy. The memo detailed the plan to use the HOA as a cudgel, to create a hostile environment that would make the new owner eager to sell. It was everything we suspected in black and white. When his lawyer saw the memo, he immediately called for a recess. The fight went out of them. They knew they were caught, and the potential legal and financial fallout from a public RICO trial would be catastrophic. The subsequent settlement negotiations focused not on if they would pay, but how much. They were desperate to avoid a public trial and further reputational damage. Karen and her husband were thrown under the bus by the conglomerate, their careers over, their reputations shattered. The final settlement was staggering, a massive 8-figure sum from the conglomerate. A portion covered my legal expenses. A significant portion went into a new charitable foundation I established in my great-uncle's name for land conservation and environmental education. The rest was mine. The HOA was forced to issue a public apology, and its insurance paid a separate, smaller settlement. They were humiliated and defanged. The war was over. I had not just survived, I had won. Victory came quietly. There was no parade, no grand finale. Just the silence of my phone, no calls from my lawyer, and no drones overhead. The settlement money arrived in my account, an amount so large it almost looked like a mistake. The lawsuit was sealed, and the parent conglomerate retreated into the corporate shadows. Karen and her husband sold their house and vanished from Northwood. The HOA, now under new leadership, sent an overly polite letter assuring me of their deep respect for private property rights. For the first few months, I did very little. I wandered the land, no longer feeling the constant anxiety of being watched, but instead a deep sense of peace and ownership. I spent hours by the creek, listening to the water and feeling the weight of the past year slowly lift. The fight had changed me. I was no longer the naive paycheck-to-paycheck designer. The legal battles, corporate schemes, and psychological strain had hardened me. I had faced greed head-on and refused to back down. The partnership with Geo Alliance moved forward, on my terms. I demanded a plan focused more on conservation than extraction. We agreed to establish a single, low-impact mine with a small footprint, less than 5% of the land. The remaining 50 acres were placed under a permanent conservation easement, legally protecting them from development forever, a sanctuary preserved just as my great-uncle Alistair had cherished it. We named the mine Alistair Lode, and its Wami first yields exceeded all expectations. The raw, uncut stones were stunning, gems shaped by millennia of geological pressure, now seeing daylight. We built a fully transparent supply chain, tracking each stone from my land to its final buyer, setting a new standard for ethical sourcing in the industry. The wealth that followed was immense, but I quickly realized the money itself was the least important part. It was simply a means to an end. Through a charitable foundation, we began acquiring other parcels of at-risk land, creating a network of wildlife corridors and protected habitats. We funded scholarships for environmental science students and provided grants to grassroots conservation organizations. My great-uncle's legacy expanded far beyond the original 50 acres, evolving into a movement for preservation, fueled by the very earth he had loved. I finally built my cabin, a modest structure of reclaimed wood and glass, tucked among the oak trees and overlooking the creek. Powered entirely by solar and collecting its own rainwater, it was just as I had envisioned. It became my sanctuary, a quiet refuge in the heart of the land I had fought to protect. Sometimes, I'd look across the valley at the sterile mansions of Northwood Estates and think about Karen. I no longer felt anger, only pity. She and her corporate allies had looked at this land and seen only profit. They had failed to recognize its true worth, something far beyond money. My inheritance wasn't the minerals or the money. It was the struggle itself. Through his journals and his unyielding will, my great-uncle had left me a lesson. Some things are worth fighting for. Integrity is more valuable than any gemstone. And the quiet rustle of wind through the trees on land you love is a treasure no amount of money can buy. The real gold mine on my land wasn't just the tourmaline. It was the peace I had found, the purpose I had uncovered, and the promise I had kept to the man who entrusted me with his legacy. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more stories.